Alright, normally I wouldn't defend a neoconservative idiot like Ted Nugent. I definitely agree with his stance on gun rights. I'm far right on such things, personal ownership of weapons, and don't worry, there's a kitty here, so might get in the way of the video at times. I normally don't defend neocons, because I don't like neocons any more than I like neoliberals. But I'm going to defend Ted Nugent on this. There are a lot of people saying that after his comments about, oh, he'll be dead or in prison if Obama's reelected, they're saying he should go to prison. I disagree heavily. I think that free speech in this country has been curbed way too much. From a libertarian perspective, leaning left or right on certain issues, according to logic and reasonable, rational thinking, I think that political correct stupidity has infected this nation far too much, and that essentially what you have now is a nation where originally, when it was founded, the idea of curbing the expression of individuals was seen as highly unpatriotic, it was seen as unconstitutional, and it was seen as morally wrong. What you have lately, with the resurgence of both, and this is a problem that we find both on the left and the right, what we see, and they blame it on each other, which just helps to further the issue even more, because they spend their time fighting and saying, well, the other side's trying to curb your freedoms. They're actually both doing the same thing, and this is why I won't vote for Obama or Mitt Romney. We have a nation where suppression of freedom of speech is seen by the mainstream as a good thing, where the less free speech that a person is capable of expressing, the better in some cases. And it strikes me as ridiculous. It flies in the face of everything that the founders held dear. It flies in the face of the First Amendment. It flies in the face of every decent ethical ideal upon which our republic was founded upon. And here you have people saying Ted Nugent should be in jail. Now, you know that the people saying this, of course, are predominantly liberals. If the same thing had been said about George W. Bush back in, 2006, 2007, it would have been primarily conservatives saying the same thing about whoever said the comments then. What we see in America, and here's the problem, here's the biggest problem in U.S. politics today. There was a time when the left and the right understood that it wasn't the difference between those who were fiscally liberal and fiscally conservative, or socially thereof, fighting amongst themselves to determine who would champion the course of the history of this country. They understood that it was the difference between the rich elites and the government bigwigs and their pushers in the media and so forth against the little people. And the little people, by the way, includes a very large number of very, very wealthy people who simply don't fit into the whole political spectrum of having a huge amount of political clout. Some of the older families no longer have political influence. They would fit in with the little people now. You've actually, ironically, got rich people siding with poor. It was an issue of those who stood up for individual liberty and individual action against those who would seek to stifle it through fascism. And that's what this country operated on for 200 years. Lately, since about the 1960s and 70s, you've seen the balance go the other way, and you've seen, since the communist sort of witch hunts of the Cold War era, what you've seen is both sides seizing on mutual enemies of the United States and simultaneously claiming that their opponents have something in common with those enemies. You see the rhetoric about communists, socialists, neoconservative, elitists, all these different groups, plutocrats. And you see things starting to divide. The problem this causes is that when the two sides are completely divided and simply fighting one another for the people so that they can become more corrupt and get more money, because literally that's what all politicians seem to be doing lately, with the exception of a very small handful that actually have held to ethical standards. The problem that you get is that rather than solving problems, they both try to coerce their constituency into giving them more governmental power to stifle the other side. Thus, you've got the government completely in bed with the media. You've got Fox News and MSNBC. Of course, they each take up for one side of the aisle, so they seem to be opposites. But really what both of them are standing for is fascism. Both media outlets and both sides of the aisle want the government to control everything. They just disagree on which aspects of your life the government should control more heavily. The conservatives predominantly want the government to control people's individual action in a social sense. The liberals, primarily and predominantly, want the government to control your lives in a financial sense. The liberals want to take your money and redistribute it. The conservatives want to tell you who you can sleep with and what religion, what God you can worship. So there's the problem. Both sides are doing exactly the same thing. Neither side represents the truth of the Founding Fathers, and neither side represents the truth of the Constitution. Anyone who is, the sort of card-carrying Republican, card-carrying Democrat, oh, I hate those Republicans, I hate those Democrats, you're part of the problem in the United States today with regards to politics, with regards to the economy. Look at how things have gone downhill since the Cold War. Look at what has happened to our government. We've gone from expecting the government predominantly not to lie to us, maybe to fib to us once in a while to keep us safe, but predominantly to tell us the truth and at least attempt to fix the problems that arise with the country as they arise, to expecting the government to lie constantly, corrupt itself, carouse around, drink, and do all of these terrible things that we know that the government does on a regular basis, both sides, Democrats and Republicans. We expect them now to lie to us. We've gone from expecting the government to show the best of our culture to expecting it to display the worst qualities of all of the trash and scum which inhabit our sewers. That's the problem in politics. So you've got both sides of the aisle saying, well, Ted Nugent should be in jail, and anyone who talks badly about so-and-so should be in jail. It's just partisan nonsense and bickering. These people don't understand. Look at it this way. If you've looked throughout history, Democrats and Republicans, they switch off from time to time in their power levels. One will be in control for a while, the other will be in control after them, and they switch back and forth. Do you Republicans really want to increase government authority when you know that a Democrat may take over in the next decade? Do you Democrats want to do the same thing if a Republican gets in charge? Of course you don't, because you don't agree with the other side of the aisle. So what would possibly compel you to want the government to take more freedom of speech, freedom of press, and so forth away? Now here's my problem. I look at people like George W. Bush. Let's take the recent Republican, for example. Oh, well, we got to pass this here Patriot Act so that we can keep people safe. Well, Benjamin Franklin stated that those who are willing, I think it was Benjamin Franklin, I may be wrong, and please don't chastise me for that, those who give away their liberty in exchange for security deserve and will get neither. And that's the case. That is very true. If you're willing to give up your liberty, which is what the country was founded upon in the first place, just to be secure, you're crazy. So George W. Bush said, oh, we'll pass the Patriot Act and set up all these camps around the country to inter people if they get out of hand. Oh, well, that's wonderful. And then Obama comes along. Oh, well, I think that we should censor the internet more heavily, and I'll stand with SOPA, and I'll stand with, all these different programs to censor the internet. DNS blocking, the same system that's used by Iran and North Korea. How wonderful. That sounds like a great idea. Let's limit freedom of speech some more. Now, I see both sides of the aisle doing this. The Democrats do it, the Republicans do it. All they do is they come up with all these stupid excuses why they need to limit people's freedom of expression more and more. Oh, well, now cyberbullying will be a crime, and, saying something offhand like Nugent did will be a crime. It's ridiculous. Ted Nugent did not threaten the President of the United States. If he had said, yeah, I'm going to kill Obama, yeah, I would agree. He should probably go to jail for that. He didn't say that. He said, if Obama is reelected, I will probably be dead or in prison. Now, a logical thinking person can take this two ways. They can either assume that he's saying he's going to attempt to assassinate the president. Do you honestly think he's going to try to do that? Probably not. The more logical thing is that he was saying that he would probably be dead because he wouldn't be able to stand the way the government was going. Because we all know, Ted Nugent's a neoconservative. He hates, basically every Democrat that's ever existed. And I can agree with him on that, but I hate all the Republicans too, because they're both part of the problem. If you're willing to give up your freedom of speech that easily, you are not even an American. You are the antithesis of what our founders predicted and hoped would be the standing of the United States by this point. It seems that since the Cold War, and even back beyond that, we've done everything we can to screw our country up. And we've started, predominantly, the number one thing we've done wrong is continuously limit people's freedom of speech and expression. That is the biggest problem in the country today. And it's quite sad, because for many years America was considered a very free place to be. Now, of course, that freedom came with strings attached, and there were always problems associated with those strings. For instance, poor work standards and so forth. And then the progressive movement came along and attempted to reform those. The best years for this country were during the progressive era in the 19-teens. That was the best era for the country, and then, of course, more politicians came along, saw we had lots of money, and they fucked it up further. And then we went into a depression. Every time that something's going well, the politicians feel at liberty to put all their little social programs into planning. Whether it's Republicans or Democrats makes absolutely no difference. And they screw things up. We know that the government screws up most of what it undertakes. Why on earth would you trust them to put people in prison for exercising their freedom of speech? That makes absolutely no sense. It's the antithesis of everything American. And anyone's claiming, well, if you question the government, you're not a patriot. And I've heard this also from the left and the right both. Well, if you question George Bush, you ain't a patriot, you're one of them terrorists. Well, if you question Obama, you're one of these terrible neoconservative fascists. You're both wrong. Questioning the government is the essential principle of liberty and of the Constitution. You're supposed to question the government. Patriotism is what happens when logical, rational people realize there's a problem and actually point it out, rather than sitting there twiddling their thumbs and being quiet because they're afraid that the G-men will come and take them away to Guantanamo Bay. That is patriotism. So I'm going to sit here and I'm going to say Obama sucks, Mitt Romney sucks as much, if not worse, than Obama sucks. Why in hell would I vote for either of them? I would rather waste my vote on Mickey Mouse than vote for either of those idiots. And that's exactly what I'll do. I'll vote for Ron Paul because, at the very least he wants to shrink government influence and get rid of some of the nonsense in the government. I don't agree with him on every issue, but I'm going to vote for him anyway because at least of the three candidates that are still potentially in the race, and of course Ron Paul won't get the nomination, he might run third party. I would rather vote for a person who is a little ass backwards and a little bit loony, but at least has some good ideas on how we should rescind some of the government's influence on our lives. Because I'm tired of the government constantly going out of its way to influence and manipulate people and buy up the media and screw with business and screw with everything else. It's just a non-stop masquerade of nonsense that we see from the American government. And it's not just the United States, it's every country. Every government on earth is completely corrupt. Every one of them is now expected to be corrupt, and none of them are doing a good job. None of them are transparent, none of them care what the people say. None of them care about our freedoms. Why in hell did we vote for these idiots in the first